Crescent Moon Becoming May World, The Elizabeth and Ramon Story. By Tiye. The perfect girl was a lie. Elizabeth Thorne was everything the town admired, beautiful without comparison, composed and untouchable. She lived a life without chaos, a life without risk, a life without true love. Then she walked into a dusty lighthouse and met Ramon Diaz. He was rugged, real, and saw straight through her polished armor. It was instant, consuming, and terrifyingly real. I fall in love at first sight. Their worlds are opposites. Her life is a blueprint, his is a spontaneous sketch. But as their secret meetings on the cliffs ignite a fierce, undeniable passion, they both realize the same truth. I love him. I love her. He became my world. She became my world. They broke all the rules just to prove that the only thing stronger than perfection is destiny. Now, let's step inside the lighthouse where their two worlds collided. Crescent Moon Chapter 1, The Stormy-Eyed Architect. The coastal town of Port Blossom had a rhythm, the clang of the fishing boats, the cry of the gulls, and the quiet, perfect presence of Elizabeth Thorne. At 25, she was the director of the Port Blossom Historical Society, an achievement often cited by the local newspaper alongside her other titles. Community darling, the flawless face, and most often, the perfect girl. Elizabeth's life was a meticulously catalogued library, organized, beautiful, and utterly predictable. She had a kind heart, an intimidating intellect, and a polished veneer that no stress, no heartbreak had ever managed to crack. She believed she understood love, a gentle partnership, a logical alliance. She didn't know what love was till she met him. The lighthouse restoration project was the talk of the town, and Elizabeth was obligated to perform the initial site assessment. The old structure, perched precariously on the cliffs, smelled of salt, rust, and untold history. Inside the lantern room, bathed in a celestial shaft of afternoon sun, a man was bent over a drafting table. He wore a faded navy t-shirt, the sleeves pushed up to reveal forearms dusted with white plaster and black charcoal. He looked up as she cleared her throat, and the world snapped into focus. The man was Ramon Diaz, the architect hired for the job. He had the rugged, unpolished look of someone who preferred working with his hands. His hair was dark and slightly too long, his jawline strong, and his eyes, a deep, liquid brown, held a directness that stole the air from her lungs. For Ramon, the sight of Elizabeth was a physical blow. The light caught the high points of her face, illuminating her perfect bone structure, but it was the color of her eyes, a turbulent, stormy gray, that held him captive. He'd seen beauty before, but this was tectonic. I fall in love at first sight. The thought was immediate, brutal, and true. "Excuse me," Elizabeth said, her voice betraying a slight tremor she instantly hated. "I'm Elizabeth Thorne, Historical Society. I believe we have an appointment." Ramon pushed off the table, a smudge of charcoal on his cheek. He extended a hand that felt wonderfully rough against her cool, smooth palm. "Ramon Diaz, no, we don't have an appointment," he said, a slow, disarming smile spreading across his face. "But I think we should." Elizabeth felt a foreign heat rise in her chest. She pulled her hand back, her composure slipping into place like an iron curtain. "The blueprints were explicit, Mr. Diaz. I'm here to ensure the original copper casings are preserved." Ramon merely watched her, his professional demeanor at odds with the hungry admiration in his gaze. "They will be. The historical integrity of this structure is as important as its structural integrity. You have my word." He paused, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips before returning to meet her eyes. "You are stunning, Miss Thorne, beautiful without comparison. I feel like I just met the rarest artifact in this entire town." The blatant honesty startled her. Men complimented her beauty often, but usually with a fawning deference. Ramon's words felt like a simple statement of fact, utterly without artifice. "Thank you, Mr. Diaz, but please, let's keep the focus on the lighthouse." She gestured toward the enormous Fresnel lens. "I have questions about the ventilation system." As they talked logistics, materials, and historical preservation, Elizabeth was hyper-aware of him. The way his brow furrowed in concentration, the effortless intelligence in his answers, the powerful energy he radiated. She was talking about Vence, but her mind was screaming one revolutionary, terrifying thought. I love him. Crescent Moon Chapter 2. The cracks in the facade. The days bled into weeks, and Ramon's work became Elizabeth's obsession. She found excuses to visit the lighthouse. Material check. A query about the original mortar. A concern about the weather seal. Ramon understood immediately. He was an architect, but he was also a man who trusted instinct over plans. One foggy afternoon, Elizabeth arrived with a thermos of coffee, ostensibly for the construction crew. She found Ramon alone, perched on a scaffolding beam, sketching in a leather-bound notebook. The crew left an hour ago, he noted, not looking up. And I know your preferred coffee is the caramel macchiato from the French bakery, which you only drink when you're distracted. She walked to the edge of the scaffolding, holding out the thermos. It's plain black coffee, Mr. Diaz, for the sake of the job. He finally looked up, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Ramon, and thank you, Elizabeth, for the sake of my sanity. He hopped down with an easy grace that made her breath catch. They stood side by side, watching the fog swallow the water below. Why are you still here, Ramon? She asked quietly. He sipped the coffee, the warmth of the cup momentarily hidden by his large hands. I like to stay after, just to see the structure at peace. It's a conversation. And what is the lighthouse saying to you? That it needs me to be patient. That true strength comes from being steady, not flashy. He turned his whole body toward her, leaning against the cold metal railing. And what does Port Blossom's perfect girl do when the workday is over? Elizabeth bristled slightly at the label. I review society minutes. I prepare for upcoming events. I maintain a life that doesn't have a lot of room for spontaneity. A perfect life, he challenged gently. She stared out at the gray, endless water. A controlled life. She paused, then let a truth slip out, one she had never confessed to anyone. My mother always told me that chaos was the enemy of happiness, that being perfect was the only way to be safe. Ramon stepped closer, closing the small, safe distance between them. I disagree. Chaos is the natural state of things, and I think perfection is just a pretty cage. His eyes held hers, searching, patient, and utterly accepting. I'm not perfect, Elizabeth. I get loud when I'm angry. I eat microwaved food for dinner. I love the chaos of building something new. And I think you're absolutely magnificent, precisely because I can see the chaos stirring under that beautiful surface. She had known him for weeks, and yet in that moment she felt more truly seen than she had in her entire life. A powerful, uncontainable feeling swelled within her. I love him. I think, she whispered, her voice thick with sudden emotion, I think I need a little chaos. Ramon didn't speak. He simply lifted a hand and gently wiped the charcoal smudge from his own cheek, then in the same motion brushed a strand of damp hair from her forehead. He leaned in, and the kiss was nothing like the polite pecks she was used to. It was slow, careful, and yet utterly consuming, tasting of coffee and salt and a powerful new future. When he pulled back, their foreheads rested together. I'm in trouble, he muttered, his breath warm on her skin. I love her. Crescent Moon Chapter 3. The World Made New. The perfect girl and the chaotic architect began their secret life. They met on the cliffs after sunset, sharing takeout and dreams. They drove to neighboring towns, pretending to look for salvaged materials, but really just stealing hours of uncomplicated joy. With Ramon, the label of the perfect girl shattered. She let her hair fall messy, laughed too loudly, and confessed her profound fear of failure. He accepted every flaw, kissed every worry away. I can't believe this is real, Elizabeth confessed one night, lying on his sofa, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Ramon wrapped an arm tighter around her. Why not? You're a woman built of strength and kindness. I'm a man who knows how to build things. Seems like destiny to me. No, she insisted, turning to look up at him. Before you, my life was a beautifully bound book that no one was allowed to read. It was safe. Now it's dangerous. I feel things so strongly. I look at you and my chest aches. He become my world. How did that happen so fast? He cupped her face, his gaze incredibly tender. Because it was always supposed to be this way, Liz. The moment my eyes met yours, the moment I saw that storm inside you, I knew. Everything I planned, everything I worked for, it all pointed to you. My past was just the waiting. She become my world the second you walked into that lantern room. Ramon's project was nearing its end, and the anxiety of his impending departure hung heavy between them. One crisp Saturday morning, Elizabeth found him packing up his drafting tools. "When do you leave?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. He straightened up, his eyes serious. "The lighthouse is finished next Friday." A knot tightened in her stomach. "And you go back to the city." "I was planning to." He walked to her, taking both of her hands in his. "I had a life there, good commissions, a nice apartment." He squeezed her hands. "I love her. Elizabeth, I love you, and I can't go back to a world where you're not within reach." Tears blurred her vision. This wasn't the neat, expected proposal of her imagination. It was simply a statement of fact, a declaration of a new reality. "Port Blossom is a small town, Ramon. There are no grand buildings left to restore," she whispered, hope and fear warring in her voice. He smiled, a wide, breathtaking smile. "Then I'll build you one. I'll build us a life. I'll start my own firm here. I'll design the prettiest library this town has ever seen. I'll do whatever it takes. Because I don't know what is love till I meet you, and now that I do, I'm not letting you go." He pulled a small, worn wooden box from his pocket. It didn't hold a diamond ring, but a single, perfectly cut piece of sea glass, the color of her stormy eyes. "Will you be my beautiful, chaotic anchor, Elizabeth Thorne? Will you make my world yours forever?" She laughed through her tears, the sound finally imperfect and entirely real. "Yes," she whispered, letting the last, fragile piece of her perfect life crumble away, welcoming the beautiful, terrifying chaos of true love. "I love him. Yes, Ramon. Yes." The lighthouse keeper's light shone brighter that night than it had in a century, guiding two people who finally knew where home was. Crescent Moon Epilogue, The Steady Light. 6 years later. The Port Blossom Historical Society was no longer housed in the dusty, cramped annex of the library. It now occupied a beautiful, sun-drenched space that overlooked the harbor, its design a perfect blend of modern functionality and historical reverence. A gift from Ramon, who had convinced the town council that its history deserved architecture that looked toward the future. Elizabeth Diaz sat at her mahogany desk, reviewing grant applications. Her hair, once rigidly pinned, was now often twisted into a loose, stylish braid, and the slight, permanent smudges of charcoal on her favorite mugs spoke of a shared life. The label of the perfect girl had faded, replaced by Mrs. Diaz, a name that felt more honest, more resonant. She was still meticulous, still brilliant, but she was fundamentally changed. The flawless composure was now often interrupted by a quick, easy laugh, a lingering impatience for trivialities, and an open, profound love that warmed the air around her. She didn't know what love was till she met him, but now she knew it was the steady foundation of her entire existence. Ramon's architecture firm, Diaz Design, had taken root, specializing in thoughtful, custom homes that maximize the coastal light. He had traded his solitary scaffolding perch for a bustling office, but the hands that once sketched the ancient Fresnel lens still found time to run charcoal across paper and across her skin late at night. He walked into the historical society now, not with the hesitant knock of a visiting contractor, but with the confidence of a man walking into his home. The scent of sawdust and strong coffee always preceded him. "Mrs. Diaz," he murmured, leaning over the desk to steal a kiss, his cheek rough with the afternoon shadow. "Project complete. The Henderson cottage signed off. Now, what's my next assignment?" She leaned into his warmth, a feeling that had become as essential as breathing. "Your next assignment, Architect Diaz, is to remember we have a dinner reservation at 7, and you promised to tell me how your meeting with the mayor really went." "The mayor is fine. He's just trying to figure out how to be as perfect as his wife." He paused, his expression softening as he took her hand. You know, sometimes I watch you and I still feel like I'm standing in that lighthouse tower again. That same shock, that immediate gut-wrenching feeling. I fall in love at first sight, he thought. A simple, true refrain he still carried in his heart. Crescent moon, the chaos, and the anchor. Their life wasn't perfect. It was real. It was a beautiful, necessary chaos. They fought over finances. Elizabeth's rigorous budgeting versus Ramon's tendency to splurge on imported Italian stone. They navigated the small-town politics. Elizabeth smoothing ruffled feathers. Ramon challenging entrenched tradition. They managed the delightful, exhausting chaos of raising their 2-year-old daughter, Clara, whose eyes were Ramon's deep brown, but whose meticulous organization of her building blocks was pure Elizabeth. One evening, after putting Clara to bed, they sat on their porch swing, watching the beam of the old lighthouse sweep across the dark sky. It had been a difficult day, a minor argument about a project deadline and a major tantrum from Clara. Elizabeth nestled into the crook of Ramon's neck. Today was a mess, she confessed. It was a glorious, complicated mess, he corrected, kissing the top of her head. It's our mess. Before you, she said softly, tracing the lines of his palm, I would have been devastated by this kind of day. I would have felt I failed at being perfect. Now I just feel exhausted and loved. I love him entirely, irrevocably. Ramon shifted to look her in the eye. That's because you let go, Liz. You let the truth of you come out. You are the most beautiful, intelligent, compassionate woman I have ever known. Beautiful without comparison. But you were always held back by that title. I saw the real you the first day, the one who wasn't perfect, just magnificent. And you, my love, she countered, her voice rich with emotion. You gave me the courage to fail. You walked into my safe little world and burned the blueprint. He became my world, a messy, loud, charcoal-stained world, and it's everything. And you became the structure of mine, he murmured, pulling her close. She become my world, the true north, the compass point for every design, every decision. Without you, I'm just a drifter with a sketchbook. They sat in silence for a long time, rocking gently on the swing. The lighthouse beams swept over them, a silent testament to the moment they met, to the instant recognition of a love they hadn't known was possible. It was a love that didn't demand perfection, only truth. It was the love of a lifetime. Elizabeth closed her eyes, no longer striving for perfection, but simply existing in the abundance of her love. She knew then, with absolute certainty, that she would never be just Elizabeth Thorne again. She was Elizabeth Diaz, and she was home. The end.